PAW Patrol has had many an animation error and goof, and I'll be showing you more than 40 of them today. First up, Mission Paw Quest for the Crown. After Sweetie's exposed, she runs out of the castle wearing the crown and gets in her vehicle. However, the crown disappears when she zooms off, though it returns in the next shot she's present. Next, in Pup Save the Bay, Rocky is in his full uniform early on in the episode and as he runs into the elevator. However, once he's in the elevator, he no longer has his vest, and once the elevator rises, he only has his collar. At the start of the pup saving adventure, when Zuma's getting pulled by a kite, we see him without his eyebrows for a shot. They fortunately come back seconds after. Now, in Pup Save the Diving Bell, after the badge on the lookout flashes, it seems as if the front of it slides off. In the promo for Chase's first ultimate rescue, Sky's without her uniform's vest at the end of it. In Pup Save a Director, following Marshall's wipeout joke, Sky's tuft disappears but luckily returns moments later. Additionally, in that episode, Rocky is seen with his uniform before the mission and as he runs into the elevator, but once he's inside of it, he's now without it. It remains like that for him until all of the pups get their uniforms. Afterwards, in Pup Pup Boogie, when riders call in Mr. Hudson, his iconic jacket appears without any of its design on the chest, just white. Following that, in Air Pups, Rebel is in only his collar for the majority of the first scene. However, in one shot, he randomly gains his pup pack, though he's back to being without it seconds later. Now, in Pup Save a Shark, Rocky is seen wearing an orange collar at the start of the episode. However, once Ryder calls, he has a black collar on. He remains with it in the wipeout scene as he runs into the elevator and after he gets his uniform where it's intentionally part of his outfit. Then in Merpup Save the Turbits, when Sky wakes up, both Zuma and Rocky's pup houses aren't in their spot, though we can see at least Rocky's appear in its place later on. Now we have pups make a splash. Despite Zuma being deployed with his pup pack, it disappears once they arrive at the scene of the mission, but he regains it shortly after. It stays with him for the rest of the episode, except for close-up shots where it's clearly not present. Then in Puppadoodle-Doo, at Farmer Yumi's farm, we can see a chicken missing its swaddle, with it seemingly misattached above its beak. Here we have Pups and a very big baby. Firstly, after the pups get their uniforms, Rocky, Sky, and possibly Rebel are all missing their pup packs. Additionally, Marshall has his visor, but loses it by the time they get to the mission briefing. Later on, Rocky briefly loses his pup pack, but regains it in a consecutive shot. In the Mission Paw Quest for the Crown promo, Ryder appears wearing a black top, light gray pants, and white shoes. However, he never appears with such an ensemble in the episode. Afterwards, in Pup Save a Super Pup, Zuma's with his usual helmet as he heads down the slide. However, Rebel's helmet suddenly replaces it as he's deployed into the bulldozer. Then in Pup Save the Baddies, after Ryder summoned the pups, he runs to the door and seems to phase straight through it. Additionally, despite Chase and Sky being the first pups sent out on the mission, Chase is still there when Sky calls and later in the scene when Rocky is deployed. In Pup Save a Sweet Mare's promo, Sky appears wearing a vest the wrong shade of pink, actually the same one as her collar. And if you've enjoyed so far, Rocky would like it if you'd like the video and subscribe. Now in Pup Save the Duck Pond, as Marshall wipes out, you can spot that he has his EMT pup pack on. Similarly, in Pup Save Baby Humdinger, after the pups get their uniforms, you can see that Chase has his spy pup pack on, though he has his intended pack once arriving at the mission briefing. Then we've got Pups Meet the Mighty Twins, where the ladybird steals the Chicolette statue pretty early in the episode. However, we can still see it in the background later on. Following that, Pup Stop Harold's Deep Freeze. Here we hear the badge transition sound and see it switch to a new scene, but the badge doesn't actually appear.
Thanks, Rocky.
Now, in the Mighty Pups TV movie, when Harold Humdinger is first shown his uncle his mighty powers, Sky Kitty is without her goggles, and Rocky Kitty is without his hat. However, in the next shot they're in, they now have their accessories on. They stay there for the rest of that scene. Earlier in the special, when Drake and Everest are setting up their telescope, they seem to set it down decently far away from the campfire. However, 2 shots later, they appear to be much closer despite not having moved any. Afterwards, Pup Save the airport opening. At the beginning of the episode, we see Zuma in his normal gear as well as Rocky and Rebel. However, after Ryder calls, we can see the trio run into the elevator, now in their air rescue uniforms. They return to their initial attire once inside the elevator. In Pup's Jungle Trouble, we have a fair few. At the mission briefing, Chase is in his spy gear and Marshall's in his standard uniform. However, Chase is in his standard uniform for a few shots. Additionally, when Mandy's calling, Marshall appears in his EMT gear. After that, Marshall's back in his initial uniform except for his hat. Though everything's back in order once Ryder calls on Chase. Also in this scene, we see Carlos sitting beside Rocky, but when Mandy calls, he appears beside Sky. Furthermore, when Carlos hops on Ryder's ATV, he's wearing a yellowish helmet. However, when they're deployed, it's replaced with an orange helmet. Then in Mighty Pup Stop the Hiccups, we see Minnie and Tot sitting in the same tree as the Goodways early on. However, when Sky comes to rescue them, the pair of palms are no longer in that tree, but in a different one. Now, Pup Stop a rocket-powered pogo stick. Rocky's in his air rescue gear as he's assisting Sky on her jet. However, after the aircraft has landed, we now see him sporting his standard attire. In Pup Save a Beanstalk, Chase has his megaphone out of his pack before and as he whimpers. However, after we see Sky coming down right after, the megaphone appears to have been put away now. In Pups vs. the Robo-Ducky, Rebel's wearing his uniform at the start of the episode and as Ryder summons him. But once he's in the elevator, he's now wearing nothing but his collar. It stays like this for the entirety of that scene until every pup gets suited up. In Jet to the Rescue, in the shot where Sky, Everest, and Tracker are all looking up at the Duke's aircraft, Tracker appears to be incorrectly lit, giving him a different look compared to the others. Here in Pup Stop a Humdinger Horde, we see Marshall park his hover car atop Katie's parlor before jumping in. But later on, we no longer see his vehicle on the building's roof, though this could simply be a matter of perspective. As for Pup Save a City Kitty, when Ryder tells Chase to send out his drone, he's without his pup pack. However, in the shot following that, it reappears. It then looks like it disappears again in the next shot featuring him. It remains like that into the next scene as Ryder requests for him to use his night vision goggles. Though after viewing the World True Night Vision, his pup pack has returned. It seems to stay for good now, remaining during consecutive shots afterwards. Following that, the Pup's Winter Wonder show. We see Sky in her vest for most of the first scene and when she talks to Ryder, but disappears in the consecutive close-up shot of her, though she regains it moments later. Furthermore, in the Wipeout scene, Chase, Rebel, Everest, and Zuma are all without their vests. However, when the elevator rises, they've all suddenly gained them. And when Tracker and Carlos are video calling, it seems as if they're driving through Jake's Mountain in the summer, despite it clearly being winter. There are also lots of recurring errors during the deployment segments. In Season 1, as Rebel runs to the slide, you may spot his vest repeatedly clipping through his belt, and when he goes down the slide, the top of his pup pack has gone missing. Also throughout Season 1, as Marshall runs to the slide and goes down it, he's without the badge on his pup pack. However, he will regain it once he's going down the slide on occasion. Now, going 10 seasons into the future to Season 11. Here, whenever Rocky is deployed into his vehicle second, he's without his pup pack on his back. It appears once he's in his truck, but then goes absent for all of the shots in the deployment scene afterwards. Anyways, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, go check out one of those videos right there, and as always, I'll see you next time.